At CNN, we see the devastation caused by natural disasters, famine, and war. We also see how the generosity of others can change lives. You and CNN's Impact Your World can help. Reputable charities that are checked out by CNN. See the difference it makes when you give time, share stories, or donate. By just clicking the button, be a part of the solution. Impact Your World.
A muted session on Wall Street as investors brace for Wednesday's Fed decision. Small falls for all the major indices. As you can see, the Dow Jones down 46 points at this point. Those are the markets, and these are the main events. Russia keeps Europe guessing on gas supplies, announcing plans to halve the flow through Nord Stream 1. The US says it's working out a plan B for Ukrainian grain exports in case the new deal with Russia falls through. And the Elon show continues. Will anything dent investors' confidence in Mr. Musk? Live from Dubai, it's Monday the 25th of July. I'm Eleni Jarkos in for Richard Quest, and this is Quest Means Business. Welcome to the show and a very good night to all of you. Russia is reminding Europe who controls its gas by planning deeper cuts on a key pipeline to Germany. Now, Gazprom says that it will reduce flows on Nord Stream 1 even further this week. It now says a second turbine needs to be shut down. The pipeline was already operating at reduced capacity. The work is taking place as Europe tries to refill its natural gas reserves. The German Ministry of Economy, meanwhile, says it is unaware of any technical problems with Nord Stream 1. The Kremlin says flows will recover once a new turbine is installed. Now, the pipeline just reopened last week after 10 days of maintenance. EU officials warned then that it might not get turned back on, and that was, of course, the big fear. We've got Anna Stewart standing by for us in London. Anna, good to see you. Right, maintenance or exerting power over Europe's reliance on Russian gas. Those are the sort of the two questions here. Looking at what the Russians are saying, look at what the Germans are saying.
So Russia is saying once again, this is really a technical issue. Another turbine used in this pipeline, a giant pipeline, and the turbines, of course, help pump gas through it. Another one needs to go out for repair, and that is why they are slashing gas supplies by an additional half from where they are now. They're currently at 40% of capacity. They're going to reduce that to just 20%, so a fifth. Now, I say another turbine because this is actually chapter 2 of what I will call turbine TIF. Turbine 1 was already sent off for repair to Siemens Europe. It ended up in Canada. That's where their facilities were there. And then it got stuck as a result of sanctions. And that is why last month Russia said they were reducing capacity down that by to 40%, reducing it by 60%. And that caused huge shock for energy markets. Now, if you speak to Germany about that turbine, they say that's not a rational reason because that turbine wasn't even due back to go into the system for some weeks or months to come. And today, Germany is saying there is no technical reason. As ever, the EU has said many times before that Russia weaponizes the use of energy, which is exactly why they're trying to wean themselves off of it. They also point to a warning from President Putin earlier this month. He did say he warned of catastrophic consequences for world energy markets as a result of any further sanctions. And I can show you what gas prices have done today. They were up some 12%. And you can actually see a huge spike sort of mid-afternoon when that Gazprom statement came in. Eleni?
Yeah, Anna, look, the big question here is, as winter is just around the corner, it's all about gas storage. Are Germany and other countries in Europe going to be able to fill up those reserves in time for winter?
That is the really big concern right now because, of course, it's summer, so people are using less energy. They generally do, and this is the time when you fill up your gas storage facilities. Right now, as a bloc, it's looking quite good. They're 2/3 full, roughly. That's the same for Germany, and that is more than it would have been last year or the year before. However, They need more gas, and there's actually a mandate from the EU to fill those facilities to 80% full by the 1st of November. Germany's gone further. They want to see it at 95%. But with already the reduced gas we were seeing even before today, and that kicks in on Wednesday, even before then, I mean, people were doubting whether or not they would even reach the EU mandate. So that is looking really tricky at the moment. If it is all technical, if turbine TIFs can be sorted out, perhaps we can see more gas being supplied. But yeah, it is absolutely keeping Europe on a very short leash, and people are getting nervous. And I think at this stage, lots of people, lots of analysts I speak to are pointing to the fact that really, Europe needs to reduce its consumption of energy now if it doesn't want to see emergency rationing come winter. Eleni.
Yeah, and Russia reminding everyone who yields the power when it comes to gas supply into Europe. Anna Stewart, always good to see you. Thank you so much. Ukraine is pledging it will continue to export grains despite a Russian missile strike against the port city of Odessa. Now, the strike happened just a day after Russia and Ukraine agreed to a grain export deal. The agreement is designed to allow the safe export of foods to fight rising global hunger. Wheat prices jumped after the strike. They had fallen after news of the deal. Nick Robertson is in Kyiv for us. Nick, always good to see you. Look, it was encouraging to see a deal signed of this nature, but then followed by the strike. And many are questioning just how committed Russia is to opening these vital corridors, but also, importantly, the risks that still lie ahead as these deals are signed.
Yeah, the risks are there, and I think one of the things that surprised everyone, and not least Turkey, who is sort of one of the guarantors of this UN brokered deal, was that the day of the strikes on Saturday, Turkey's defense minister called his opposite number in Russia, Sergei Shoigu, who had been in Istanbul the day before signing the deal, and basically said, did you do it? And the answer that came back from Moscow was, no, we didn't do it. Absolutely not. Nothing to do with us. Strangely, by Sunday, another day later, Russian officials were saying, actually, we did fire the missiles and we were firing them at military targets. And I think further to that today, Monday, again, in a concerning tone being set by Russia, we've heard the foreign minister saying that actually there's nothing in this agreement that says Russia can't target military installations in the port of Odessa. There is no ceasefire agreement in this, no ceasefire part in this UN brokered deal, but it is flying in the face of expectations, certainly in the international community. Russia being condemned for firing the missiles. President Zelensky today has said, no, Ukraine absolutely committed. It knows that there are people around the world, millions of people that are depending on this food. Ukraine continues committed to try to get this grain out.
Despite Russia's missile strikes in Odessa Saturday, Ukraine's officials are vowing to push ahead with the UN deal to get grain from their ports to the world's needy.
I hope that during upcoming days we will start delivering grain from our seaports in Odessa.
But Russian missiles aren't the only obstacle creating uncertainty about Russia's commitment. Russia's foreign minister asserting nothing in the deal prevents them hitting military targets in Odessa, and misinformation too, claiming rights for Russian ships not in the agreement.
In the open sea, Russia, Turkey, together with another participant which is to be determined, accompany the convoys to the Straits.
So we won't allow to do this. Our territorial waters and our seaports, only Ukraine and Ukrainian Navy will be there.
So no Russian ships escorting the convoys anywhere along the convoy?
Ships at all in this process.
Ukraine's plan B, to export grain by train, truck and river, is still in play. But like the UN deal, this too is beset by uncertainty. Train cars full of grain have been shelled by Russia and tracks blown up.
We are again doing our best. We are trying to export more through our Danube ports with the help of our railway, Ukrainian Railways company, and by trucks.
If the UN deal to export grain from the ports can hold, Ukrainian officials estimate the value to their beleaguered nation could be a much-needed $1 billion a month.
There's a benefit here as well for Ukrainian farmers who are really, suffering because they can't sell their grain. Their stockpiles in their silos have been full. They can't have nowhere to put the grain that's being harvested from this year. We heard from Ukraine's agrarian minister earlier today saying within the next couple of days, Ukraine's farmers should be able to sell to the shippers. And he said that the price of corn in the country already was going up 20 to 30%. And he thought by the end of the week that the price of grain for farmers in Ukraine should have gone up by about 10%. Now, that's big news for Ukraine's farmers because they need the money as much as, the starving parts of the world need this food security, need the grain getting out to them so that they can eat it. The farmers here also need to support their families and their communities.
All right, Nick Robertson, thank you so very much for that update. Now, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is fighting back against claims that Russia is exporting hunger. He's traveling to several African countries to try to gain support after the agreement on grain exports. Speaking earlier in the Republic of Congo, he said the Russian strikes in Odessa do not threaten the deal.
If we talk about the episode that took place in Odessa, there is nothing in the obligations that Russia has taken on, including within the framework of the agreement signed on July 22nd in Istanbul, which would prohibit us from continuing the special military operation, destroying military infrastructure and other military targets.
Well, Washington is also trying to gain influence in Africa. USAID Administrator Samantha Power was in Kenya and Somalia to discuss food insecurity. Larry Madowo asked her how she's working to fight hunger in the region and who needs to do more. Take a listen.
Eleni, even if it was not planned like that, this is what ended up happening. Two senior officials, one from Russia, one from the US, in Africa, almost overlapping. And the U.S. announced $1.3 billion extra humanitarian and development assistance to help countries like Kenya, Somalia, and Ethiopia deal with a record drought here. But Sergei Lavrov is getting a red carpet welcome, and he's here to tell Africa, oh, we're your partners. And that's why Samantha Power called out China for not doing enough to support the global food crisis and contribute to alleviating the suffering of people here.
This is a moment for all countries that play leadership roles in the international system, as the People's Republic of China clearly aspires to do and has done in certain domains. It is for them, for all of us, to show up and to dig deeper than we have so far if we are going to prevent this crisis from becoming a catastrophe.
How big is the impact of Russia's invasion of Ukraine into the current problem you're seeing in Kenya and Somalia and Ethiopia?
In terms of food, just coming from Somalia, more than half of the wheat in this country, in the country of Somalia, comes from Ukraine. It is trapped in the port of Odessa. 20 million metric tons of wheat and corn are trapped. So, we can all hope and even pray that the deal that the United Nations negotiated, but that Russia immediately turned its back on by bombing the port of Odessa, that deal somehow sticks.
Do you worry about Russia's commitment to that deal if literally just hours after it was signed, they're already bombing Odessa? And what impact will that have if they don't honor the end of the deal?
Well, we have been living the contingency plan because there's no way you can trust anything that Vladimir Putin says. We are working with the Ukrainians on Plan B. Plan B involves road and rail and river and, again, sending in barges and adjusting the rail systems so that they're better aligned with those in Europe so that the exports can move out more quickly. But there is no substitute for Putin allowing the blockade to end, his blockade to end, and the grains being sent out the most efficient way possible, especially because we've lost so much time.
Eleni, after Samantha Power's trip here in Kenya and Somalia, she's off to India, trying to find an alternative to finding wheat and grain for some of the people who are worst affected by the drought and the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but still a real dire situation here, and she's asking countries like China to do more. to make sure that people here don't die because they have nothing to eat. Eleni?
All right, that was Larry Madua for us in Kenya. Now up next, a Fed rate hike, US GDP, and a slew of corporate earnings. Why this could be a make or break week for Wall Street. Stay with us.
Being a Restovac robs these children of their soul. They never feel like they're valued. I remember one of the girls said to me, "It's as if I'm living, but I don't exist." My name is Joan Kahn, and I am the Executive Director for Restovac Freedom Foundation based in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Restovac Freedom Foundation works with children who are living as Restovac. It's a form of child slavery. Many of them work from sunup to sundown. They do most of the chores for the family. When CNN came to Haiti for the Freedom Project with Common Dreams, we found this child in an area that we work. Her name is Edna, and she lived with her grandfather at the time. And we went to visit the grandfather and asked if he would allow her to go to school. And he agreed to do that. And so we actually took her and enrolled her in school for the first time. She was 9 years old. Now Fedna is 20, and so she's in the 10th grade. They get a really late start on life, but at least they are able to be part of society. And I think just seeing these children become visible to people is a powerful thing.
Heard it all before? But have you heard it like this?
The ultimate disruptor looks set to shake up our world. We really can't ignore the impact that this has. What can we do that explores a fresh angle? So let's untangle the players and political forces. The truth is a lot more complex. What's really going on?
Fast-paced news, in-depth reports, and fact checks from the perspective of The Global Brief with Bianca Nobilo. Tonight on CNN.
Right, the Dow has been up and down to begin a big week for earnings and economic data. S&P 500 and Nasdaq are both lower. Dow Jones, as you can see, down 57 points. The Federal Reserve is expected to hike interest rates by 0.75% Thursday. Second quarter GDP is due Thursday as well, so that's going to be market moving. A contraction in the second in a row. We know what that means. That means trouble for US President Biden. And his Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, is optimistic about the number. She says the economy may be slowing, but is not in recession. Markets are down right now. We're also expecting that Fed rate hike later this week. Rahel Solomon is with me now to give me all the details. Rahel, it's not a question of if we're going to see a rate hike, it's just what the percentage that we're expecting. Could you tell me what you're hearing on the street?
I think that's completely fair, right? I mean, heading into this meeting, the expectation was about 0.5% to 0.75%. And I think that is still very much what we will likely see on Wednesday, much more leaning toward 0.75% rate hike, which we did see at the last meeting, Eleni. But to put that in context historically, we haven't really seen a rate hike of that magnitude since 1994. So it really gives you a sense of just how aggressive the Fed needs to be. But Eleni, even taking a step back from that one data point, it is a massive week of economic data and earnings. So this week, Wall Street, Washington, all sort of watching what happens. So let's start with tomorrow. We get consumer confidence. Essentially, how are Americans, how is the American public feeling, not just right now in terms of their personal financial situation, but also in the months to come on things like their own personal finances in terms of the jobs market and how that might impact their spending decisions. So that's very important. That's been trending lower in recent months. So lots of attention on that tomorrow. And then as you pointed out, Eleni, on Wednesday, we're going to hear from Chairman Powell as we expect a rate hike certainly of 0.5% to 0.75%. Thursday is probably the biggie this week. That's when we get our first look into second quarter GDP. As you rightly pointed out, if we see another negative print, it is going to reignite the debate that we are already in a recession, because that is sort of the rule of thumb of recessions, although the White House has certainly been pushing back that that is not the official definition of a recession. That would come from the National Bureau of Economic Research. That's a group of about 9 private economists. It's a nonprofit group, and that group defines a recession as a significant decline in economic activity that is broad-based across the economy in terms of business spending, consumer spending, the job market, and there is quite a bit of debate about whether we're actually seeing that. That said, if we see another negative number on Thursday, it is certainly going to reignite the conversation that we are already in a recession. And then Friday, we're going to get a key inflation report, the personal consumption expenditures. This is actually the Federal Reserve's preferred inflation gauge. It's a bit more broad than the Consumer Price Index, which gets a lot more attention, but this is actually the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, and we're going to get that on Friday. So, Eleni, it is going to be a very, very busy week.
Yeah. If ever there was a balancing act, I think this would be the week, right? We're also expecting quite a few earnings, specifically from the tech companies. What are we expecting on that front? We've got to, keep in mind that these earnings are backdated. We have to look at the forward-looking statements, and those are always peppered with really interesting information.
Yeah, we're going to hear from a lot of the tech heavyweights, a lot of major S&P 500 companies in general, but certainly the tech heavyweights from Apple. And when it comes to Apple, we're going to be wondering, are people still buying iPhones? That's going to be really important. We're going to hear from Alphabet owner, Google's parent company, Alphabet, in terms of the ad business. We're going to hear from Facebook and Meta in the ad business. So that's going to be really important because, Eleni, we've started to get, certainly last week, we've started to get indications that ad spending is slowing, right? We heard it from Snapchat. We heard it from Twitter. And so these are sort of the heavyweights in the advertising industry, right? Meta, Google. How is advertising spending, and what does that say about business spending, right? Are companies starting to pull back on their marketing budgets, on their advertising budgets because of these concerns of a recession? So it's a very big week. Again, you have Wall Street, you have Washington, all sort of watching what happens in the days to come. It will be busy, to say the least, very active, to say the least, Eleni.
Yeah. And you and I will be having a lot of these conversations this week. I look forward to those. Thank you, Rahel Solomon. Always good to see you. Now, one of Germany's top economic surveys warns the nation is on the cusp of a recession. Business confidence fell by more than expected in June to its lowest level in 2 years. This as high energy prices and gas shortages loom over Europe's largest economy. Joining me now is Karen Carniol-Tambor. She is the Co-Chief Investment Officer for Sustainability at Bridgewater Associates. Really good to see you, Karen. Thanks so much for joining us. I want to start off with what we're seeing out of Germany, where business confidence, the IFO index, came out. It's looking really, low in comparison to what we saw over the past 2-3 years. What does this tell you when you see Germany coming under so much pressure with risks still very much on the horizon?
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. I think conditions facing Germany and Europe as a whole are the toughest they've been in decades. And I think the business survey reflects what makes sense, which is that growth has slowed to, right around very close to zero, and a recession is very likely. I mean, there's been a shift to stagflationary conditions, meaning growth is bad and inflation is high at the same time everywhere, maybe outside of China or so. But in Germany, it's been maybe the worst because there, not having energy very directly means you literally can't power the type of economic growth you need. Energy is literally being pulled back, and they just don't have the energy they need, and they have a lot of industry that's reliant on literally using energy that's not there anymore in order to power its economic growth.
Look, you mentioned stagflation, and I'm looking at all the economic data we're getting out of the US this week. The GDP number is going to be absolutely vital. We're getting inflation. We're looking at consumer confidence. And of course, we mentioned it in our earlier conversation with our correspondent, that it's not a matter of whether they're going to cut. It's just by hike rates, rather, but just how much they're going to hike. And it puts the Federal Reserve in a really precarious and sticky position because they have to focus on price stability as opposed to growth.
I think it's the toughest set of circumstances the Fed has been in since, the 70s or so, just for the reason you're saying, that they really can't achieve their dual mandate at the same time. They're going to have to choose between getting inflation under control and having growth be a lot weaker than they're hoping, or having growth be strong and not having inflation under control. And that's a very tough spot to be in. Chances are they're not going to be able to sort of keep one decision, and you'll see them kind of go back and forth, which is why you're going to look back and say this is a period of stagflation. Growth is too low, inflation is too high. It's kind of gone back and forth. And one of the important things to remember on a week like this is that the Fed hasn't literally hiked rates, but that's already expected by the markets. And so if you look at the way market pricing has been, it has priced in the biggest change we've seen in decades, from no tightening expected to a lot of tightening expected. So the impact on the economy starts getting rolling, that ball gets rolling before the Fed actually raises rates, right? That gets priced in, it gets expected. The further out rates, like mortgage rates, start rising. And so the makings of a recession, the makings of a slow our economy because of that tightening are already kind of in the system and making their way to hurt household wealth, to hold household confidence, to make it harder to borrow. And so the Federal Reserve is very quickly going to be seeing growth falling a lot more than they'd hoped, and yet not seeing inflation coming down as much as they'd hoped, and being in that tough spot and having to choose what to do next.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's a painful process, right? Once inflation starts to bite. There was a time, a couple of years ago when the Fed was saying, look, we have to start pulling back on the stimulus. We have to stop with the easing. Do you believe that we should have seen more of a proactive approach in order to be in a better situation than we are right now? And do you think they have to be more aggressive and hike rates more aggressively, because inflation is dangerous? It's dangerous to have out of control inflation, especially with the global risks on gas and food prices?
I think the Fed absolutely waited too long and believed for too long inflation was transitory. But the thing I will say is that a lot of the reason we got here is not just Fed policies, was the mix of Fed policies and fiscal policies. So what proved so effective about inflation going at such a high rate as we're experiencing now is the fact that not only was the Fed so easy and printed money, but at the same time, the federal government put so much stimulation to respond to COVID. I mean, they literally sent every person a check. And so that combination of money printing and literally getting money into people's hands so it could be spent, you're not relying that you hope they'll go borrow. You're not relying that quantitative easing will somehow trickle down. Literally, people's checkbooks changed, their bank accounts, they had more cash at hand than they've had for a long time. We saw household balance sheets getting better. We saw it happening throughout the whole economy, not just the wealthy, because everyone got a check. And so that mix of policies wasn't just the Fed. It was the Fed and tremendous fiscal stimulation. And yes, the Fed was too slow in responding to what was then a massive boom coming out of COVID and pulling back. And part of the supply shock that's now happening is, a confounding factor that is happening for them at the worst possible time. And so we could have had a war, at any time in theory, but it happened at a time where inflation was already getting going and when energy and food markets were already very tight. And so it only took a small disruption to create a very serious supply shock on top of what was already a booming demand, a set of situation where people had more money to spend than the economy could possibly supply.
Karen Carniel-Tambor, thank you so much. Good to see you. Right, moving on, firefighters have gained some control over a raging fire in the U.S. state of California, what the blaze has destroyed and why it's so hard to contain when we come back.
Over 250 million young people are not in education, employment, or training. But how you start in life shouldn't determine what you do in the future. In the last 3 years, Future Makers by Standard Chartered has supported more than 650,000 talented young people from low-income communities, transforming lives by empowering them to learn, earn, and grow. Because where others see problems, we see potential. We're Standard Chartered, and we're here for good.
These troops, they are Russian. I've spoken to the commander. He said they are now in control. Over that way. It's a secret location. They're going to fire on Russian forces. There has been a ferocious battle here. There's unexploded grenades everywhere. We're being shown the powerful American guns, giving them an edge.
You downplayed the US intelligence assessments. Do you now regret that?
I'm in Kiev right now, and it is under attack, Mr. Lavrov, from Russian forces.
I'm being told by our security that we need to get our flak jackets on.
No matter where you are in this country, lives are being shattered.
There are thousands streaming out. It is at least a chance to save their own lives. Matthew Chance, CNN.
I'm Becky Anderson, 200 metres above the city of Dubai. This is CNN.
Welcome back. Now, California firefighters say a blaze near Yosemite National Park is only 10% contained. The Oak Fire has burned more than 16,000 acres in just 3 days. Authorities say a long-term droughts, climate change, and dead trees left by bark beetles are all fueling the rapid spread. The fire comes as a heat wave sweeps across the U.S., with parts of California seeing temperatures nearing 40 degrees Celsius. Now, 60 million people are under heat alerts across the country. Camilla Bernal is in Mariposa County, California. The images are heartbreaking, just seeing the devastation. Tell me what you're seeing right now.
Yeah, they truly are devastating, and a lot of it is because the fire is so fast moving, so it doesn't give people a lot of time to leave. But it is fast moving because of what you said, climate change and the drought here in the state of California. The evidence of that drought, you can see it pretty much everywhere you are in this area. Here you see a part where it is extremely dry, and then you see exactly where those flames came into this lot here, this property. The fire is now at 10% containment in comparison to the last couple of days where it was 0%. So there's a bit of good news there, but we're seeing it continue to grow every single day. On Saturday, it was about 14,000 acres. On Sunday, about 15,000 acres. And now we're getting close to 17,000 acres. So you're seeing it grow day after day. That's why a lot of people were told to evacuate. And unfortunately, there are some people that are going to come back to this. It really is complete destruction. I mean, you see the burned cars. There are still a lot of hot spots here. It is smoky. It is hard to breathe. And this is exactly why authorities are telling people, if you are in one of these evacuation areas, you have to pack up and leave. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people who say, I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave my belongings or my animals behind, and so they're refusing to leave. But the reality is that there is still a lot of work to be done here. This fire is only 10% contained, and look, they added a lot of resources. On Saturday, they had 400 people working on this fire. Today, they have more than 2,500, so they feel like they are going to make some progress, but the danger is not yet over. And as you mentioned, the heat and the temperatures, the afternoon hours, those are the hardest hours for firefighters because the temperatures increase, the humidity decreases, and the winds start picking up. So ideally, they want to see those lower temperatures. Those come later on at night, early morning hours. But of course, we're waiting to see what happens over the next couple of days because as of now, that fire continues to grow. Back to you.
Yeah, and I can see smoke, behind you, and that's the reality. It could reignite. When we say 10% contained, there's so many risks abound. Camilla, thank you so much. Good to see you. Environmental changes are threatening production of one of the world's most popular fruits. The date is a Middle Eastern staple, but CNN's Jumana Karacha reports climate change is making it harder for Iraqi farmers to grow the fruit.
At the entrance of Iraq's Al Hajara desert, thousands extend across the horizon. Young date palms recently planted in hopes of saving an age-old staple that is now under threat.
The date palm is the symbol and pride of Iraq. That's why we wanted to replant palm trees, to restore this culture to what it used to be, a country of more than 30 million palm trees.
Iraq's long been one of the top date producers in the world, with millions of date palm tree groves across the country. But swaths of once thriving plants have since withered away, dehydrated, and blighted by environmental changes.
Before, we had an abundance of water, rainwater too, coming from the mountains. This area was like a sea, but due to the lack of rain, the land started drying up gradually.
Decades of drought, in addition to ongoing conflicts, are slowly creating desert-like conditions in once lush areas. And as water levels decline, salt levels rise, posing new challenges for those hoping to keep the industry alive.
The issue of water salinization began around the mid-90s, which created another issue for us other than the issue of cutting. Now, if people want to plant new palm trees, they will face saltier water and soil.
The UN stated in a press release that it is supporting Iraq in mitigating and adapting to climate change. The country's environmental situation has been subject to a number of converging pressures, ranging from poor water quality, deforestation, soil salinity to air pollution, conflict, and land use change. Amid efforts to reverse some of those collective impacts on a key agricultural sector, some of those who depend on its success fear the worst.
What is in my heart is a dread of never seeing the palms again. We are waiting for the palms to come back. But over here, everything is barren. There is no water, nothing. I don't know that it will come back. I worry the beautiful days won't ever come back.
Whether the date palm industry can be revitalized before it's too late remains to be seen, as Iraq tries to save a national icon from our global climate crisis. Jumana Karache, CNN, Istanbul.
Now, it has been a messy start to the week for Elon Musk. Tesla revealed this morning that it's been subpoenaed over his tweets again. The US regulator is separately looking into Musk's tweets over his $44 billion bid for Twitter. The billionaire is also being accused of bad behavior offline. Musk has been forced to deny a Wall Street Journal report that he had an affair with the wife of Google co-founder Sergey Brin. Paul LaMonica joins me now. Paul, hello, welcome. Always good to speak to you. You know, sometimes I go check out Elon Musk's Twitter feed just to see what he's up to because there's always so much drama. And I guess the question that everyone has is just how he's been getting away with what he's been saying. You know, how is his board responding, or is it just behavior that everyone around him is accepting?
Yeah, I think, Eleni, that at this point, Tesla's board members and the board members of all the other companies that he runs are probably used to this behavior, which to many of us will admittedly seem a bit odd and rash and shocking. But bottom line, Elon Musk owns about a 16% stake in Tesla. So it would take a lot for investors to find reason to say, you know what, you've got to stop this, Elon. We really need you to be on best behavior. You know, he controls a big chunk, of course, of the company's stock. He is the CEO. So I think that at the end of the day, unless Tesla's stock tumbles dramatically, and obviously it's fallen this year about 25%, but the whole market is taking a tumble, I don't think Musk is going to feel that he needs to change his behavior for the benefit of anyone else. That's my take on it, at least.
Yeah, I mean, we're having this conversation. So many people are. I'm sure the board is as well. And I guess the question, if it doesn't have a material impact on the reputation of the company, of the running of the company, or even on the stock price, then I guess they're in a difficult spot. But he's a really interesting character that is making headlines, that is, shaking things up at Twitter, for example, offering that he wants to buy it and then pulling back. And it's been fascinating to watch this entire thing play out.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a Twitter shareholder, obviously you don't find much of what Musk has been doing with some of his tweets and memes and what have you to be all that amusing, because Twitter was hoping to be bought at $54.20 a share. Musk says he doesn't want to do the deal anymore, and Twitter stock is obviously now dramatically below that $54.20 per share price. But when it comes to Tesla, he has really built this company into a leader in the electric vehicle market. And I think at the end of the day, there are people who probably disapprove of Elon Musk's behavior and his public persona. But I'm guessing, Eleni, that they're not the ones that own Tesla's stock. They're just choosing to vote with their absence, if you will. The longtime supporters, and there are many really vocal, big fans of Elon Musk, they don't seem to mind his behavior because, again, he has built a market-leading company, and until there is something that shows that Tesla's going to have a dramatic fall from grace, and maybe it's going to be the competition from GM and Ford and other global automakers that finally humble Elon Musk, I don't know. But until that happens, Musk doesn't have much incentive to change his public behavior, and
Yeah, and perhaps getting away with a lot more than most. Paul and Monica, always good to see you. Thank you so much. And that's Quest Means Business. I will be back at the top of the hour as we make a dash for the closing bell. Up next, Quest's World of Wonder. Stay with CNN.
We've missed the globetrotting and adventures, and we're longing to get out and go.
This is living.
Quest's World of Wonder, next on CNN, in association with Turkish Airlines.
You can help the refugees from Ukraine. Join the over 80,000 who've already raised millions for food, shelter, and more. Explore cnn.com/impact. Click to take action.
Quest's World of Wonder, in association with Turkish Airlines.
Hello. Gorgeous. This is what a vacation looks like.
La 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 la.
I have been in Izmir merely a matter of hours. And already I'm being warmly welcomed by the ladies of the Fancy Women's Bike Group. They are singing songs I don't know, but humming along seems to work well. The ancient port city of Smyrna. Today, Izmir is Turkey's third largest city. They call it the Pearl of the Aegean. People have been settling by these shores for around 8,000 years.
Welcome to Izmir, Richard.
Ah, wonderful to be here. Cycling may be fun, but at my arthritic knees, a brisk walk along the promenade will do just as well. It is good to feel the sun on my face after a long, hard winter. And even if the temperatures here in Izmir haven't risen yet, and there's a brisk breeze off the Aegean, it is the perfect way to start my visit to Western Turkey. I'm here before the tourist hordes arrive. While there is still the good weather, good food, it's a good life. And the day starts with a good local delicacy, only to be found here in Izmir.
100% handmade bakery. We do it with the traditional way.
It's one that requires skill and experience to get right. Boyoz. How easy is it to make?
It's not easy to make it because you should spend 10 years to learn how to make boyoz, but it's delicious to eat it.
A perfect challenge, if ever I heard one, for me to embarrass myself having a go. Assuming I can get up these very steep stairs. Those knees again.
So the dough contains only flour, water, and salt. So he's gonna turn the dough in the air.
This is how it's supposed to be done. It's all in the muscle memory for the master baker. No recipe required. And everyone's handmade?
Yeah.
But machines can make it?
No, there's no machine to make boyoz.
Where does this come from?
Actually, boyoz belongs to Sephardic Jewish people's kitchen. They moved to Izmir more than 400 years ago. So when they come, they bring their culture actually and their kitchen actually. So since like beginning of 20th century, boyoz belongs to Izmir.
Bearing in mind that they make 1,500 of these a day, so that means there has to be 10 in a rack, so there's 150 of these have to be done. And so to the moment we've been waiting for. I shall try not to disappoint. Yeah. Well, it was going well. There we go. Oh, I mean, if you make a mess, you've got to tidy it up, haven't you? If in doubt. It's supposed to be getting longer, but it's actually getting smaller. But you won't notice if I just grab it like this. I've got bad news for you. You're going to go out of business if I do this. I'm almost embarrassed to offer this to the oven. Let's assume I don't fall down these stairs and kill myself. Come on. While I wait, it would be rude not to sample the goods. Oh, this is hotter than I thought it was going to be. Oh. Wow! I'm like a child who can't wait. I'm paying the consequences. My mouth is now burned. I've got chocolate everywhere, and I can't stop. My batch is ready, and the proof is going to be in the pudding, or if you will, the bouillots. So, let's ask, which ones are mine and which are the chef's? I bet you can't tell the difference, can you?
Yeah, of course I can. These are yours. These are our chiefs.
How would you describe Izmir? One word.
We are so lucky in Izmir because our life is vacation in Izmir.
This phrase, life is a vacation, it is something I will hear again and again here. Now, fortified with bouillots and needing to work off those calories, it's to the landmark Konak Square. Here the pleasures are simple and they are everywhere. And all around are the ladies selling bird seed for the pigeons. Now, of course, I'm feeling guilty about who I'm going to buy from. How much are you? No, little one, little one. Feed the birds, tuppence a bag, tuppence a bag. I don't think Mary Poppins would approve of me messing around like this. I enjoyed that. Who's the bigger kid here?
300 million years ago, there was no Africa, Asia, Americas, or Europe. Just one big supercontinent, Pangaea. And today, there is still a force connecting those divided by distance, reversing millions of years of rifting. Making far feel close, bringing there to here. Turkish Airlines.
Izmir is a smorgasbord of religions, with the great Abrahamic faiths all here. The call to prayer comes from the imams, the church bells ring, and the chazans chant. As a Jew, I'm of course especially interested in the role played by the Sephardic Jewish community. As I discovered with bouillots, the Jews arrived here in the 16th century, having been exiled from Spain. They settled and built a thriving community, endowing hundreds of synagogues. And all the synagogues, there were dozens at one point. I mean, there's one, two on the other side, that's 4. This one here, that's 5, all back to back. Imagine what it must have been like on Shabbat or High Holy Days with all the chazans and all the rabbis, eh?
3 more around the corner from here.
Today, a mere handful remain that Gilda Goenka is delighted to show me.
Hevra, Shalom is over there.